Democracy versus other types of government, which is the best? Introduction. All countries in the world are governed by a system known as the government. The government is made up of systems and people such as administrators and legislators among others whose main role is to ensure proper governance of the state. From time immemorial, state governments have played significant roles in human activity, hence the ideology of politics to elect the ruling government. As such, governments come into place after the conduction of elections, or upon the appointment of rulers depending on the form of political system adopted. It is also important to understand that there are different forms of government systems adopted globally. The type of government system adopted depends on a variety of factors. This paper is therefore an in-depth analysis of the various forms of government by making a comparison of each and thereafter giving an opinion on the best form of government. Types of governments and their differences. Some of the commonly known types of governments include republic, democratic, dictatorship, monarchy, and aristocracy governments, just to mention a few. Below is a brief discussion of some of the common forms of government. Democracy governments. In this type of government, the citizens of a nation govern the nation by electing persons through fair and free elections. The elected people are expected to rule and govern the country following the rule of law. Republic governments. Individuals elected to make laws and ensure their enforcement characterize these governments. Monarchy governments. For a long time, nations adopted monarchy governments whereby they were ruled by kings or queens from the same family line. In nations where the state is large, the king or queen is referred to as an emperor. Dictatorship or authoritarian governments. These types of governments are ruled by individuals or groups of people who are dictators, thus forcing the citizens to follow their ideas and opinions. World-renowned dictators include Fidel Castro of Cuba and Hitler of Germany, among others. Aristocracy governments. As the name suggests, aristocrats who include people of integrity and the wealthy in society rule in aristocracy governments. For instance, most leaders of the United States of America are aristocrats. Difference between democracy and other government systems. Democracy is different from the other types of governments in several ways. However, the four main elements that make democratic governments different are: democratic governments are characterized by free and fair elections, active participation by citizens in their political and civic lives. The rule of law in democratic states is applied equally to all citizens. Democracy protects the human rights of citizens. From the listed elements of democracy, it is evident that citizens are the key players of governance in democratic states. This is different from the other systems of governance where the governing rulers are the main players of governance. Secondly, democracy is characterized by electing people to government offices, something that is different from the other government systems where people are appointed to office. Thirdly, power regimes in democratic governments are periodic, with elections being held periodically to elect new leaders or retain the existing leaders, but with the consent of the citizens. Most of the other forms of government are characterized by unending power regimes where leaders rule for their entire lifetime or leave office because of natural causes such as death. Finally, yet importantly, democratic governments are characterized by freedom of rights to the citizens. In democratic governments, citizens are free to practice their own religions and cultures and be able to air their views without fear. This makes democracy a unique system of governance because, in most of the other government types, citizens adhere to the rules and laws of the leaders, hence subject to punishment upon deviation. The best form of government. Based on the elements of democracy mentioned above, it is clear that citizens of a democratic nation have higher political authority than in all the other forms of government. This indeed makes democratic government systems the best form of government because of the consideration they have for people. Unlike in authoritarian and monarchy governments where the flow of power is downwards, that is from the leaders to the people, in democratic governments, power usually flows upwards from the people to the leaders. As such, the leaders normally comply and listen to the voice of the people. This is therefore an indication that the rights of the minority in the society are protected in democratic governments, unlike in other forms of governments where the people's voices are not listened to despite their cries. Democratic governments are the best form of government because they allow citizens of a nation to carry out their civic duty of voting, which is also their human right. In this, citizens participate fully in the governance of their nation as well as being informed of the national public issues. Additionally, democracy is by far the best form of governance since the people are free to criticize their elected leaders and representatives as well as observe how they conduct the business of government. The elected officials who fail to comply with the suggestions and needs of the people face the risk of being removed from office. This plays a significant role in making sure that leaders at local and national levels serve the people diligently. The fact that the elected people have periodic terms in which they hold the office also makes democratic governments a fair mode of government extensions in terms that can only be granted by the citizens through elections. This is not normally the case in other forms of governments such as in the monarchy types where people rule forever. More often than not, leaders in democratic governments are the people's choices. It can therefore be assumed that leaders in democratic governments have good leadership qualities given their popularity in the elections. A common notion is that democracy should be superior to dictatorships because they are able to select the best people. Conclusion. From the above discussion, it is evident that governments play a significant role in the political and civic life of citizens. While citizens in democratic governments have the freedom to exercise most of their rights, those in other forms of government are normally humiliated and not allowed to enjoy their rights. This in turn makes democracy the best form of governance among the aforementioned types of governments. Nevertheless, authoritarian or dictatorship governments can be ranked as the worst form of government because of the torture they cause on human beings.